Hey guys, John Paulamy here, Actionable Intelligence. Today is Saturday, February 26th, and this is the weekly market update. The disclaimer, anything that you see or hear on this podcast or on this video is for informational purposes only. I am not a financial advisor. I cannot give you personal financial advice. It's your money, it's your responsibility. Please do your own due diligence. Okay. So many people have emailed me, messaged me, and DM'd me and asking about my family in Ukraine. My wife is there right now for some different reasons. She's been there for a while, and people were calling me and messaging me, wondering if everything's okay, well wishes, prayers, wishes of, everything's going to turn out right. So I just want to give a quick update personally. Everything's fine. My wife is in Kherson City, which is on the Black Sea, basically where the Dnieper River goes into the Black Sea. It's a city of 500,000. It was one of the first cities that the Russians took or a bypass. They haven't actually been in the city, according to my wife. And they've already moved up the Dnieper River on the east side as part of the operations, and to the west towards Mykolaiv, which is more of a military city than Kherson is, and ultimately Odessa. But there's no combat in the city. My wife did say a couple cruise missiles flew over. You could see them and hear them. There was some presumably launched by the Russian Navy and for targets north of the city or in the interior of the country. There were some explosions last night to the west, presumably the Yuki forces blowing up bridges to try to trade time for space, or space for time, if you will, slow up the Russian advance. There's not, like I said, there's no Russian troops in the city. There's been no bombs or artillery strikes or anything like that. The city's just not a military city. They do have a base outside the city, but I think it was already taken. I saw some video on one of the sites I go to. There was a air assault by the Russians, and the Yukis just let them land and gave them the base, basically. So you have to understand that different parts of the country have different views towards the Russians. I'm not going to get into that in this video because it'll be a 4-hour video. And quite frankly, I really don't want to give my views out on this. It doesn't matter what I think or somebody on Twitter thinks or what you think. It only matters what Mr. Putin thinks at this point. So we'll talk a little bit about that and how that relates to Russian stocks that I was talking about earlier in the week. People question me about that, but continue on. Food is running out. My wife and father-in-law stood in line at a bakery for 4 hours to get some bread. They bought as many loaves as they could because they also had to buy for neighbors. There's a lot of old people. People don't have transportation. Transportation in the city shut down. Most people don't have cars, and they can't walk to different districts. Luckily, the neighbors have a car, and they went around with them. But there wasn't, most stores are closed, at least in this city that she's from. I think one hospital's open. Basically, things are kind of hunkered down. Seems like the Ukrainian government didn't really prepare the civilian population for the possibility that the Russians could invade. You have to understand that these parts of the world are, we're propagandized here in the West, but these places are very propagandized. So there's no, unless you have a satellite dish, you can't get Russian news or TV, so you can't see the other perspective. But there's so much misinformation and propaganda anyways. So like I just put a vignette in here, the people below us in the apartment building, there's a young family with 2 kids. They're already out of food. One of the neighbors was already out of food too. So this could get ugly if things don't, they're not even talking, the Yuki News isn't even talking about any of this. They just, kind of ignore what's going on. I don't think that they, according to my wife at least, so they try to look at Russian sites, but a lot of the internet sites from Russia are blocked. So anyways, panic is setting in. People are like, there's no basements where they are, so, and there's no metro in Kherson. So my wife and those people, and my family is not panicking, but a lot of people are going to the adjacent apartment block and sitting in the middle of the quarters in the middle of the building. But there's been no artillery, or they haven't seen any Russian troops or anything, not even any Ukrainian troops. So it's just not anything happening there, which is good because there's other cities like Kharkiv and Mariupol that are where there is combat operations taking place in the cities. So in Nikolaev, and the outskirts of Kiev. So many people, well, before getting into this, like I said, thanks a lot for reaching out, folks, and asking what was going on. I appreciate it. Shows what kind of people we have here in this viewers and this tribe that we've created here. Appreciate the well wishes and like I said, the outreach definitely means a lot. RSX update. You know, I was talking about buying Russian stocks. They've been decimated. This is kind of almost like a once in a lifetime. There were stocks that were selling below 1 PEs. There were certain stocks that had 25 and 40% dividend yields. So the question becomes then, in the interim, there's going to be a lot of volatility, as we've already seen. You know, stocks can drop. Basically what happened was, I don't think it's necessarily because of just the prospects for Russia. It's forced selling by funds and other people. They're just not going to sell and ask questions later, right? Ready, shoot, aim. So you don't want to, if you're merging market funds, there's a lot of forced sellers. Now, I like these type of situations. I liked forced selling. We've made money on this before. People just want to get me out, and you know, what's the current price reflecting the real risk? And that's, you know, a difficult thing to assess sometimes. It's hard to game this because why? The information is horrible. You have fifth and sixth columns in both countries. You have the Western media. There's so much propaganda. There's so much gaslighting. There's so much misinformation and disinformation. You don't know what's really going on. I'm going to give you a couple of sites that I go to. I've used both these sites for over 10 years to track various these situations. I've been interested in this conflict and conflicts in Syria and in Iraq and stuff. I will give you the sites that talk about this. You'll probably find that they are they're more anti-West and more pro Russia. You may not like that, but it gives you a different perspective. You will see some shocking things on the one site. Mariupol, some local militias, they're stopping people. You will see a video of a family being pulled out of a vehicle and shot for trying to leave the city. The guy behind them takes off and goes around the roadblock, and he's being shot at. This is, you know, I'm sure there'll be people on Twitter and say those are Russian troops doing it. I'm telling you that this is a very complicated situation. It's not something I want to get into. I may talk about this on a reality check. It's simply not going to be appropriate for YouTube. This situation there is very complicated. It goes back a long time, and there's a lot of emotions flying around this, mostly by people in the West have a week or 10 days ago had no clue that where these places were, what was going on. So I'm not here to inflame your biases or passions. You can have any opinion you want. It doesn't matter. And in my opinion, it doesn't matter. As I said, it only matters what Mr. Putin and the Russians' opinion is, because they hold the initiative right now. Quite frankly, militarily, this was decided when Russia crossed the border. Russians have a quantitative and qualitative military advantage. The question is, how long does it take to resolve militarily? The UK army just doesn't have the ability to withstand this. Ukrainian Air Force, Navy is gone. Command and control is gone. So you will have small pockets of resistance. There's no way to coordinate the Ukrainian forces. You have some decent, the Ukrainians are getting some decent kills. The Russians got extended in a few places, and some supply trains were taken out. Some other things happened, but we don't know because there's such a fog of war over the battlefield right now, and there's so much propaganda. We won't know for a while, but there's no way that I can tell you right now that you can quite easily figure out, even piecing this together, even through the propaganda, that the Ukrainian forces are collapsing. If you don't have command control, if you have no ability to communicate, there's air superiority by the Russians. Even if you could coordinate your forces and try to concentrate forces on a particular area, you won't get there. It's similar to the Battle of the Bulge, when the Germans advanced to the Ardennes, and then, you know, they had no air superiority when the weather cleared. Their columns were just tore up on the road by the Allies. So this is, how long is this going to take? The Russians on the second day of combat, in my view, kind of held back as they reached out to Zelensky, President Zelensky, and we're talking about negotiations. They put their terms up. He never responded, so they turned back on the military assault. You will note that there's been quite a bit of asymmetry going on. There's going to be some guerrilla stuff going on. They're placing weapons systems, talking about the Ukrainians. There's pictures all over in residential areas, in the middle of apartment blocks, artillery pieces. And this is to dissuade the Russians from dropping a, you know, laser guided bomb on there and then taking out an apartment complex. Okay. I think the Russians are trying to minimize the amount of casualties that they can to the civilian population, because they understand that there's a propaganda element here. But, you know, this thing, in my view, we'll just have to see how it plays out. And I think that in the next couple of days, even the gaslighting propaganda is not going to be able to hide the fact that the Ukrainian military just doesn't really exist as a coherent fighting force any longer. So then you go on to the political event. So the problem with a lot of people in the West is they choose not to actually listen to other people. Mr. Putin was quite clear. You can go on the internet. He gave many speeches. He talked to many people. He was very clear on what the objectives would be and why they were doing this. You don't have to agree with those objectives. You don't have to agree with his reasoning or the Russians' reasoning. But though that's, like I said, they hold the initiative right now. And so it only matters what the facts are on the ground. The objectives that were stated by the Russians prior to this were, and there was many attempts to negotiate this. The West and the Ukrainians just didn't want to do this. The Ukrainians kind of got sold out by the West. Like I said, I don't want to get too far into this because people have their biases and some people are just going to get angry. But bottom line is that the Ukrainian military, similar to what happened in Georgia on August 8th, 2008, they call it 888, similar situation. And nobody said anything, nobody cared. There's another country that was farting around thinking they were going to get into NATO. The Russians went into Abkhazia, I believe, and basically did to the Georgians what they're going to do to the Ukrainians. They're going to completely destroy the Ukrainian military. That's objective number one. Their ability, their heavy weapons systems, their air force. They will not have a coherent military when this military operation is over. That's goal number one, which is in process. And then the second will be, and this is what really gets people because they don't understand the history. They don't know what's been going on there for the last 15 years, 10, 15 years. The denazification of the government. What's going to happen is that the government in Ukraine, the current one, will be collapsed. It will collapse. A pro-Russian interim government will be put in place, and then the Russians will require the following: the recognition of the LPR and DPR as autonomous states, maybe in a confederation with a larger Ukraine, maybe not. A declaration of neutral status. There will be no more talking about NATO or any of these other things. And then the rounding up and prosecution of far right-wing Nazis, that's what the Russians call them, of Svoboda, the Azov battalion, and the rest of these right-wing crazy people from Western Ukraine, nationalists, ultra-nationalists that perpetrated all kinds of crimes over the last 10 years. They will be tried. They'll either be killed on the battlefield or they're going to be tried and dealt with. That's what they're talking about, the denazification. If you don't believe me, you can look at the fire that was set in Odessa. I think it was the Ministry of Education when the ultranationalists burned up some Russians in there. They had to jump out of windows. The constant heavy shelling of Donetsk and Lugansk and various areas on civilian populations by these ultranationalists. Like I said, this is more probably for a reality check where I can get into the history and actually show you how some of these people are, who these people are by name, and what they've been doing. So that's what's going to happen. There's nothing the West can do about it. Ukraine bought into the idea that was sold to them by NATO, I think, and the West, the US, that, you know, go along with this and we'll back you up. And they got rug pulled. I mean, Zelensky had a speech the day before yesterday, where that's exactly what he said. You told us you were going to help us, and we're here by ourselves, defending ourselves, and no one's helping us. So, and the bottom line is they're not going to get any help. There's not going to be any Western troops going there. There's not going to be any help. Maybe they get some weapons, but it's too late now for them. And so militarily, this will get wrapped up fairly soon. Politically, more difficult. It's going to be so many things in play. Does the West, I mean, the West put sanctions on the other day, but they were weak. There's nothing on energy. They didn't kick the Russians out of the SWIFT. Here's the bottom line. Russia has had sanctions on themselves by the West for many years. They have divested themselves as many dollar assets as they could. They've increased their foreign reserves, their gold reserves. They could, if they were kicked out of SWIFT, for example, let's game this out. If they were kicked out of SWIFT, that means they couldn't do any international banking. It would be very difficult to do business. All they have to do is shut off the oil and gas and energy to Western Europe, and Western Europe would cease to exist in 30 days. It would be Mad Max. And I will show you why in a minute. So there's no interest in doing that. They got, Western, it was a poker game, and the West was holding 2-7 offsuit. They went all in against, two aces. So this thing was just a mess. So what's the final outcomes for Russia? I just told you what I think is going to happen. That's the stated goals of the Russian Federation. They've made it quite clear. If you don't want to believe them, that's your choice. But so far, they've done what they said they're going to do. I expect that after they're able to establish that, they will pull their forces back into Belarus, Russia, and into the LPR, DPR. They have no desire to stay there in Ukraine. People seem to think they want to take over all Ukraine. Ukraine, outside of Kiev and maybe Lvov and some Kharkiv, it's a third world country. I mean, people don't even have flush toilets in a lot of the villages. So why would they want to, they took, when Crimea decided to become part of Russia, they've spent $30 billion there just getting the infrastructure. This is part of the issue that a lot of people don't understand. The government in Ukraine is a kleptocratic, oligarchic type situation. It has been, not this present, just the present government, all the governments in independence, they just go there and loot the country. And they don't fix anything. Things are crappy there. And, why would Russia want to inherit, and have to spend 100, 200, 300, $500 billion or whatever it would cost, to upgrade the place? This is what happened in Crimea and Lugansk and Donetsk. As soon as the Russians come, everybody wants a Russian passport, which entitles them to benefits and stuff like that. Russia doesn't have the money to do this. So why would they want to take it over? Why would they want to subject themselves to some kind of ongoing guerrilla campaigns, people taking pot shots at them? Stupid. They want to create a situation where they have a buffer, and they can do that. They will destroy the Ukrainian military as a fighting force, and so it can't continue doing what it's doing to the two republics in the east. And then they will install a pro-Russian interim government, and then we'll see what happens after that. So sanctions were weak, like I said. Nevertheless, they could be expanded. Maybe the West will kick them out of SWIFT, with the exception of energy, for example. Maybe they will say that you can't export oil, or nobody in the West is going to buy their oil. But that's like shooting yourself in the head. And I'm going to show you why. Like Austria, for example, gets 90% of its gas from Russia. I mean, come on. They're not going to go along with sanctions like that. Germany, I'm going to show you a slide here, gets almost, anywhere from 40 to over 50% of their energy from Russia. They're not going to go along with that. They'll cease to exist in 30 days. It's the fourth largest economy in the world, Germany. It's an industrial powerhouse. It requires huge energy inputs. And, the governments in Western Europe did this to themselves over the last 15, 20 years. Energy security has been talked about is economic security. And when you rely on other people for your energy, and, unless you want to live in an agrarian, poor, society, scratching out a living out of the ground like a bunch of hobbits, you need energy inputs. And they've tied themselves to Russia over the years because it was easy. And they did that. They didn't, Germany, for example, I think this week is when they actually shut down 3 of the 6 remaining nuclear power plants. And they were asked in the press, well, maybe you should delay shutting them down. We're not delaying shutting them down. So why would anybody in the EU or NATO countries, which are EU countries, so where's the leverage? You have no leverage. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll go on a suicide mission and kick Russia out of SWIFT, and maybe they will, refuse to buy any more, Russian energy supplies, and then they'll just be economic basket cases in 30 days. So I don't see that happening. So what I do see is I think this is a tremendous opportunity. I think that Russia will meet its military and political goals in Ukraine, just like they did in Georgia, just like they did in Crimea. I think that everything will probably stabilize over the next 6 months, and then this will fade from the news because they'll be coming up on US elections, and people will take all the Ukrainian flags down from their Twitter profiles and all that and move on to calling, the Republicans Nazis or whatever they're going to do. So, but it's extremely risky because there are a lot of potential outcomes. I have to say that I did not think that the Russians would do what they did. I think that the final straw, from my understanding, was when Zelensky came back from recent meetings, I think it was Germany, again, he started talking about, Ukraine building a nuclear weapons as a deterrent to Russia. And that was the final straw, I think, for the Russians. That's why, if you saw one of the initial objectives of the Northern Front, Belarusian and Russian forces, was to take Chernobyl over. Why? Because the constituents of fission and nuclear energy are the antecedents to a nuclear weapon, various plutonium, or the ability to take the waste there and turn it into a dirty bomb. So that place was secured immediately. And, they weren't going to let these ultra-nationalists that are around that government there with the crazy talk. I mean, I'll give you an example of how some of these people talk that are actually in the government in Ukraine. You have a large Russian-speaking population in the East, in many cases over 50%. They've changed the laws in Ukraine where you're not supposed to speak commerce language, is supposed to be Ukrainian, not Russian, and all this stuff. And they made a lot of wild comments about some of these people. We have to expel from the fatherland or the motherland the Muscovite Jewry that's infesting Eastern Ukraine. I mean, that scares people. And then you're sitting there in those provinces constantly shelling them and, trying to do whatever, and with all these weird things that they're saying over there. And a lot of people in the West are not aware of this. So I'm not making excuses. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not picking sides. What I'm telling you is this is the reality on the ground. And so I think that was the final straw. I think Putin didn't want to do this, or the Russians didn't want to do this. Why? I mean, it's not going to be good, but in the final, if it plays out like they're thinking, and, in the fog of war and the best laid plans of mice and men, and anything can happen, right? So, nevertheless, this is similar to, I think, what happened in Georgia, except much larger in 2008. And if you remember that, most people don't. And I think this will all, be a rollover. That's best case. Now, anything can happen, but these stocks are so cheap in Russia. This is only for the most risk-averse people. You have to go into this position sized accordingly, such that a possible outcome is a big fat zero, that you lose all of your investment there. There were already people in the Russian Duma saying that no dividends should be paid to anybody in the Western countries. Presumably that would be even US citizens. I don't know. The US could pass regulations saying that stipulating that you can't, they've already stipulated you can't transact Russian debt securities through these large banks. They could easily say that you're not allowed to hold any stocks or any kind of ETFs. I don't know. Anything's possible at this point, especially over the next couple of days when this thing starts to come off the rails for the globalists. This thing's going to collapse in Ukraine, and then there's a possibility they could be coming back with more and more sanctions. So we'll see. But I would suggest to you, because people have been emailing me about this and messaging me, only the most risk averse, with the idea that you do have a chance, and I can't quantify the percentages at this point, that you can lose everything in Russian stocks. But to me, being able to buy things like at the same prices of post-Soviet prices when the Soviet Union collapsed, coming in there and buying things so cheap, your upside, especially in a commodity bull market where these companies that are there are tremendous values at this point. I think you're being compensated for the risk, for the potential upside. But like I said, don't come back to me a week from now if there's a ban on Russian stocks, you're forced to sell, you take another 50% hit. It could happen. It could happen. All right. So this is why NATO and the West isn't going to do anything. So this is from the German economy minister. He says that 50% of German coal comes from Russia. German economy minister says 55% of their natural gas comes from Russia. German economy minister says 35% of our oil comes from Russia. And that's not just Germany. Like I said, I mentioned, I think Austria is 90% of their natural gas. I don't have all the percentages. I was going to do the work, but obviously I'm busy and my mind's on other things. So this is why they're not going to do anything. If sanctions are increased more by the West, like kicking them out of SWIFT, they'll just shut off all the energy supplies. Now, I've seen dummies. I should even say this. I should know better, but I'm going to go there. I mean, people really are not very smart, I think. I don't know. Maybe they're just emotional. Well, if the Germans aren't willing to wear blankets and sweaters for a week or two to support the Ukrainian people, then, they're just trash. I don't think you understand what would happen if you just all of a sudden took this away from Germany. You could probably go on the world markets and bid up, replacements, but everybody else you already have oil in short supply around the world, still in backwardation. So you'll be competing on the world market. So right off the bat, if you take that oil that's exported to them, or it'd be all of Western Europe, you would tip the supply demand balance. Oil would, go to $150, $200 a barrel. And what would happen if you couldn't get it? German industry would collapse. You'd have blackouts. I mean, do you think the German people would tolerate that for a day or two, much less a month or two? I'm quite sure that Russia can sit there and take the beating for 2 or 3 months and, not being able to transact. How would the German economy look like in 90 days if you took this much of its energy away? Like I said, they could probably go around and scrounge up around in world markets, but there's shortages of all this stuff. That's why these prices are at. That's why we're so excited about the commodity bull market. Again, it goes back to, if you don't have energy security, you don't have national security. And these countries gave away their energy security, okay? And so they are dependent on a country that they now think is antagonistic and that they need to do something. These people aren't going to do anything. I mean, I saw Mario Draghi, he's advocating for sanctions, but he carved out exceptions for Gucci and diamonds and stuff like that, because Russians like to buy diamonds and Gucci shoes and stuff. I mean, these people in Western Europe are not serious. People in the West are not serious. People in the East are. People should have listened to Mr. Putin over the years. These are serious people in China and Russia. Okay, you may not agree with them, but people in the West are not serious. I mean, you have a congressional election coming up in 10 months here. We're not going to do anything except for talk. That's all we're going to do. Are you willing to go to you? I mean, I told somebody was talking to me and they said, well, we need to do something. What do we need to do? Can you even show me where Lugansk and Donetsk is on a map? They have no clue. Hey, I'll buy you a ticket over there. You can go to Lvov, go to the Azov battalion's headquarters. They have recruiting offices, and I'm sure they have an international brigade. I know some diaspora Chechens are going to fight there. Other people are going to fight there. You can go fight there. There's been all kinds of videos. I had a guy down from South Texas that was fighting for the LPR. He made videos. I don't know if he died or what happened, but there's international. It's like the Spanish Civil War. If you want to go there and fight, you can. But what do you mean by we? I don't have any interests in any of this. I'm not going there and fighting. I don't want to be involved in this. It has nothing to do with us. That's my view. And it doesn't matter what you want to do. You can't do anything. We're not going to escalate this with the second largest nuclear power in the world and risk a thermonuclear war. It's just not going to happen. It's bad for business. Come on, wake up. And you see this. I mean, it should be self-evident. This thing is a lot of talk by the West. That they're impotent. They can't do anything. I think they're hoping that they can bring enough international pressure, but what's going to happen? Nothing. Let's get back to some other things now, because that's emotional stuff and people are going to get mad because they don't like, they're reacting. They don't think this stuff through. They don't have any historical precedents or taking other people's shoes. But I will say, I will put up a video by Scott Ritter. If you remember Scott Ritter before the Iraq War, he was a weapons inspector for the UN and for the US. And he was a former Marine colonel or captain. I can't remember. He's a Marine officer. And he was saying, we should not go to war with Iraq for weapons. They don't have an ability to create any weapons of mass destruction. He was ignored. He was ridiculed. He was pushed to the side. He had made a pretty good video the other day with the guy I was interviewing, and he was talking about this whole situation. It will give you some perspective, maybe some other ideas, and maybe you'll maybe look at this thing differently. All right, this is Trican Well Services, which is a major oil services company in Canada. And this is, I think, from their recent, well, it is, I don't think it is, from a blurb from their recent quarterly report. And what do they say? They're talking about labor, and let's go down to the highlighted areas. It says, and I think we're communicated this many times before, but we did add crew 7 in our fracturing division. So there's a lot of demand, so they wanted to add another fracturing crew. Listen to what they said, though. It took over 6 months to get the people to add the crew. And so we don't expect that's going to change going forward. And they say up here earlier, says, the capacity is tight. And so I think the industry overall would be sort of operating at its max capacity from a people perspective. And whether there is a discipline or not, it probably won't matter because people just won't be able to add equipment like they used to. This is what we've been saying. This is why I'm so bullish on oilfield services. I will be adding a couple names in the March issue, which should be coming out here in another week or so, of Actionable Intelligence. This is very bullish, and this is what we're seeing across the industry. Not able to ramp up like in the past because people don't want to work or can't work or aren't interested in coming back. So if demand for services is up, because some of these wells now at 90, $95, $100 a barrel, you're making huge returns. So there's going to be companies are going to go out and drill, and they're going to want to expand. And while some of these wells to 100, 200% internal rates of return at these prices. So there will be drilling, but there's not enough people. It took them 6 months to scrounge up the people to put another crew on. So that restricts the supply. Therefore, if the demand exceeds supply, we expect prices to go up. So kind of bullish on oil field services. This is just another vignette or anecdote, but we're seeing more and more discussions like this. So this is official. I think I talked about this before, but Biden administration freezes new oil and gas leases to combat climate change and drive up gas prices even higher. Goal is to get to $7 a gallon, for climate change. So it helps force the energy transition. That's this person's opinion. The Biden administration today freezes new oil and gas drilling leases after court rules against them. We talked about the court case, but they finally froze the leases. I actually think it was the largest lease sale ever, which I found interesting. And maybe they knew it was going to get frozen by the court, so they knew they had an out. But this is another example of bad policy. Bad policy has repercussions. You see the lack of energy security, what it's led to in Europe. So they are impotent to do anything, even if they wanted to, in this situation in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, simply because they're impotent. They're so reliant now on Russian energy that they can't risk escalating this to the point where the Russians would turn off the energy supplies and thereby throwing their economies into a Mad Max type situation. And we're making the same dumb decisions here. This is why ultimately, I think, I don't know the timing, but ultimately, as I've said before, I believe that oil will trade above $200 a barrel at some point, maybe even higher. We're simply not going out and finding and developing resources to replace what we've already produced. And here is a Josh Young, Bison Interests. I guess they put a video together, and I didn't watch it, but this is a slide that they tweeted out. This is why I'm still bullish on oil. As long as I see this happening, whereas OECD this is basically your developed countries in the West. This is their days remaining of oil supply. And you see it's at lows where the last time it was this high, we were at all-time highs in oil prices. And, you know, we got a long way to go here. So if this doesn't turn around, I stay bullish on oil. People say, well, John, hasn't oil ran enough? If the supply of oil and inventories continue to decrease, why would I sell oil? It's in backwardation. It's telling the market, give us more oil, give us more oil. Demand is there for more oil. That's what the price is telling you. Okay. And you see, look at these inventory levels and look back, you know, back to 2005. We're almost down to these areas where oil was consistently well above $100 a barrel. And so the recent spike, yes, was exacerbated by the Ukrainian-Russian situation, but we're going there, folks. If we don't have a recession, a world recession that chokes off oil demand's coming back. And I'm going to show you another slide here. You know, Nigeria can't increase oil supply. Oil prices are, this is from Nigeria's petroleum minister, prices are strong, and that we're not able to take advantage of these prices. We've talked about this before. They cannot increase production because they have not reinvested in additional capacity. Okay, you have to do constant reinvestment in extractive industries, and we have not done that across the world. Here's the demand side. India fuel demand at a record. India's fuel appetite seen at record even as oil nears $100 a barrel. Demand has been pegged at 214 million tons within the year, an all-time high, and a rise of 5.5% from revised estimates for 2001 and 2002. So there you have it. I mean, demand is increasing, supply is declining. That means higher prices until you get to a certain price where supply is increased, which takes a long period of time, or demand is choked off. Demand gets rationed, or the oil supply gets rationed by price to the person that's willing to bid at the highest. So I don't think we've seen that price yet. You know, the inflation, like I talked about last week, the inflation adjusted all-time high is over $200 a barrel. So interesting doings in the uranium market. This is the Sprott fund for uranium. You see that we've been in a constant bull market. It's a 50-day moving average. You saw the big spike we had this late summer, early fall. All the Johnny come latelys came in, and then, you know, you consolidated. This is what a bull market does. And now you've broken out of the downtrend. And so does that mean another leg higher? I don't know. I'm not a fortune teller, but this certainly is positive. And so we're seeing a big slug of demand came in for this on Friday. And so, you know, this is the kind of chart that you like to see, you know, going from the lower left to the upper right, staying, you know, coming down, kind of ticking that 200-day moving average and moving higher. You want to see, you know, after a big move like this, you see the consolidation over time, and then the bull market continues. So this is a very positive looking chart. And so I would rather be long this chart than short it. Same thing in stocks, more volatile. I like how the 50-week, same thing. These are going to be more volatile than the actual, you know, uranium price, but came down and, you know, you're like, okay, man, if this 50-day crosses this 200-day, we're in trouble. Kissed it, and there's, you know, rallied on Friday. So as long as this can work its way higher over the next several weeks and get us out of this little danger zone, this is still a positive, bullish looking chart. Again, you get way ahead of the two. When you get this kind of big, huge gaps above the 200-day moving average, you're just poised for a pullback. It's too far, too fast, and you need to consolidate. And so, you know, you had opportunities where some of the uranium stocks were off, you know, over 50% or more. And I hope you were in there buying them and, you know, getting another bite at the apple. I was in there buying, and I think you're going to be rewarded. We are in a uranium bull market. I do not know how long it's going to go on. I do not know how far it will go. What do you do in bull markets? You buy the dip. You had the dip. You should have been buying. I hope you did. All right, guys, that's it for this week. Like I said, a little bit late on Saturday doing this, but a lot of circumstances as to why. Again, appreciate people reaching out. Appreciate the very kind words and interest in what's going on. I hope this was useful to you. Look, I'm not trying to inflame passions. There's a lot of people that are emotional about what's going on. I don't worry about things I can't do anything about. I worry about my family, but the overall geopolitical things is not up to us. It's going to be up to people. And our goal here, as I've stated before, is let's remove the biases as much as we can. What are the facts? what are the facts, and then how can we estimate probabilities and whether or not something is going to work out in our favor, i.e. Russian stocks. So you can choose not to buy them like you think it's evil. Like some people don't buy tobacco stocks or cannabis stocks because they have a moral view that doesn't allow them to do that. The same thing is okay here. Everybody's an individual, but please don't at me about this stuff. I have my own views. I'll probably put them in the reality check. A lot of people won't like them, but this is the way things are. As far as this financial channel is concerned, we are here to look at things as factually as we can. There's a huge fog of war on this thing. And so it probably is better just to step back and turn your Twitter off for a while and not worry about it. It'll all shake out in the end. And we have this channel, and anybody watching it or listening to it on the podcast really can't do anything about it anyway. So you either don't want to participate or participate in these stocks. I think I gave you a rational view of what the potential is against the risk. Hope this was helpful. One thing I will ask the podcast listeners to do, I'd really like to grow the podcast. I know a lot of guys listen to it driving to work. That's why we put it up there. It's basically just an iteration of this video in audio form. But if you could go on and, if there's some way on whatever podcast tool that you listen to, Spotify, whatever, Apple, I don't know. If you could give us however good rating if you enjoy this, it's helpful us to move up the rankings and get additional listeners. And that's what I'm trying to do, right? I'm trying to get out there and get my name out there. That's how you can help me. It really worked on the YouTube channel. People helped me out. And if you could do the same thing, whatever podcast venue, if you can go there and comment or click, the stars or whatever thumbs up, I don't know what they have, but if you can do that, it would be helpful to me and I would appreciate it. All right, guys, that's it for this week. We'll talk to you next week.